everyone. Greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm back here in studio. Todd has a functional microphone again. Let's provide proof of life of your microphone. Todd, can we do that?
Hello, hello, hello.
Indeed, there it is. Speaking of proof of life, he's back. The latest plague to hit this show. Pestilence. The McIntyre family looked it dead in the eye and frankly got their asses kicked. But everybody's feeling better now and doing great, Aaron, correct? Yes?
Yeah, I joked when we had the mouse in the studio, what's the next plague to hit our studio? And I put one option, death of firstborn. And Tuesday night about, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., Benjamin felt like death. I got thrown up on by both children on Tuesday night. I felt fine. And then Wednesday night came. I felt fine. And then Thursday morning came. I did not feel fine.
No. Then your poor wife.
Yeah, on Friday.
And the crap rolls downhill.
I couldn't leave her hanging out to dry, knowing how that felt.
Not after she takes care of all three of you, and then she gets to then the rest is left for her, right?
Yep.
Well, it's glad to see everybody is back in normal, man. There is a ton of people sick in this community.
Shocked.
Despite how nice of the weather we're having, that's the other thing too. And maybe that's part of it now. Maybe. Because it has been nice and we're out and about and everything's so crowded where normally this time of year there'd be cold snow and you don't want to leave your house, right? But we are getting just destroyed. I mean, every member of the therapy clinic my wife works at, every member of their support staff has had to take sick days this week. My son-in-law is starting a new job and Autumn got sick over the weekend and now Mom is sick now. Anastasia is. He was going to start a new job today. The owner of that business is sick out, so they're starting it. I mean, that's just in my immediate circle of how many people I know have been hit with this stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody who reached out with messages of prayer and support. I do appreciate that, but I was just shocked by the number of people who said, "Man, yeah, I've been sick. It's knocked me down. It's knocked me out." A lot of people all over the country just really sick this season.
I mean, we all came to work with COVID. I did twice. All right, so. I mean, we're used to working, you're playing when questionable here. So for any of the three of us to get doubtful to, I got to sit this one out, gives you an idea of how bad it was. So glad to have Aaron back. And that's a good reminder, too, just in case you never know. We've talked so much over the years about our friends over at Deace Medical. Let's just give you a quick refresher. They provide different cases full of emergency medications that make it so you have them the second you absolutely need them. And it gives you that protection and peace of mind. And the process is really easy. You just fill out a simple form online, and they want to make sure everything's on the up and up. And they make it convenient, but also they make it possible for hey, that could never happen here. They said that in Western Carolina last year. They said that in LA earlier this year. So we've all said that quite a bit here in the last few years, right? So get the Deace case, the personalized emergency kit that contains several essential antibiotics and medications that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. You can expand it to their increasing menu of options to customize it as well, including Nobel Prize-winning ivermectin can be added as an add-on too. All right, so go to Jace.com, enter the code DACE10 at checkout for a discount on your order. That's Jace, J-A-S-E, J-A-S-E, Jace.com, discount code DACE10 for the discount at checkout on your order. DACE10 is the discount code for the checkout at Jace.com. Coming up on today's show, we are going to be joined by friend and colleague Steve Baker, who's got a lot to say about if he's maybe our crack research reporter here here at the Blaze. He's got a lot to say about some news that's hitting the airwaves right now, including what ultimately ended up happening with him and many other J6ers with their case. We'll talk to Steve Baker at the bottom of the hour. Next hour, we're going to talk to you, or at least we're going to let you talk to us. We're going to do some Ask Me Anything with questions from our following over on Facebook. But before we get there, here's Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by I Need Some Benign and Innocent Explanations. The third crew member of the Black Hawk helicopter that collided with a commercial airline flight last week in Washington, D.C. has been named. Captain Rebecca Lobach was 28 years old and a native of Durham, North Carolina. She was a distinguished military graduate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and commissioned in 2019 as an active duty aviation officer. Initially, her family asked the Army to withhold her name, asking for privacy. Lobach had 500 hours hours of flight time prior to the collision. 64 people were on board the commercial plane, which departed from Wichita, Kansas. 3 soldiers, including Lobach, were on board the helicopter. The exact cause of the crash is still being investigated. Donald Trump on Truth Social added this over the weekend, quote, "The Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high by a lot. It was far above the 200-foot limit. That's not really too complicated to understand, is it?" In Philadelphia, investigators are still trying to piece together why a Medivac flight went down shortly after takeoff in a high-density area of that city. The aircraft was a Learjet 55 carrying a pediatric patient who had recently finished treatment at Shriners Children's Hospital, along with a parent and 4 crew members, all of whom reportedly were on their way back to Mexico. In addition to the 6 victims who were killed in the plane, Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker said Saturday that a 7th person who was in a car at the time of the crash also died, along with other injuries on the ground after the plane exploded. What a disastrous couple of days in U.S. aviation. Moving on, begun the tariff wars have, with Donald Trump announcing a 25% tariff on most imports from Canada and Mexico and an additional 10% tariff on goods imported from China. In retaliation, Canada announced their own tariffs against U.S. imports because apparently tariffs are a terrible idea only when the United States does them. Additionally, for reasons only Allah knows, the province of Ontario has ordered its liquor stores to strip their shelves of American imports immediately, not after they're all sold, because that makes sense for some reason. Trump said last night there could be some short-term pain.
But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion.
Chuck Schumer, your thoughts?
Let's just take Super Bowl Sunday, okay? It's going to affect beer, okay? Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac, because what is guacamole made of? Avocados, both from Mexico.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is, who drinks Corona out of a can?
谁喝罐装科罗娜?
Anyway, in completely unrelated news, Mexico completely capitulated this morning. Donald Trump said on Truth Social, quote, "I just spoke with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It was a really friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigrants into our country." So there's that. Some Trump wins over the past few days. He authorized a strike on ISIS operatives in Somalia on Saturday. The identity of those killed has not yet been revealed, but the president says there are no civilian casualties. The Department of Justice had ordered the FBI to fire 8 of its top officials involved with January 6th and sundry Hamas cases. Also, Trump, according to Elon Musk, is shutting down USAID or USAID, the preeminent international quote-unquote humanitarian development arm, wink wink, of the federal government. In 2023, USAID, which was established back in 1961, was dishing out American assistance in roughly 130 countries, with the biggest beneficiaries being Ukraine, Ethiopia, Jordan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Somalia, Yemen, Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Syria. After a visit and an ultimatum from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Panamanian President Jose Raul Molino vowed Sunday to end a key development deal with China. Trump has, of course, pointed out China has way too much control and influence in the Central American country, a choke point for global shipping to and from American ports. All right. I know you've all been wondering what went down at the Grammys last night. Here are the top 5 moments, starting with recording artist Alicia Keys.
DEI is not a threat, it's a gift.
Okay, never mind. The Democrats have selected a new national chair. It's Ken Martin, leader of the Minnesota Democrat Farmer Laborers Party. Seen here, you might be tempted to think, hey, this may be smart, a white guy from the Midwest who's worked his entire adult life in Minnesota politics as the state went from purple to reliably blue. Here's a clip from the DNC's national meeting over the weekend where a handful of state party leaders were asked,
how many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat? Okay. So that's good. You all passed.
Outgoing party boss Jamie Harrison told CBS News,
should Kamala Harris run again?
Yes, she wants to.
You think she could win?
I believe she can.
Oh, and Democrats also elected David Hogg as vice chair of their national party, the Parkland High School mass shooting survivor who rode the tragedy to fame as a gun grabber. Apparently, Democrats emerged from their den over the weekend, saw their shadow, and now we're looking at 6 more years of cultural Marxism. Good luck with that. And finally, a special message from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Castro.
Years ago, we bet big on electric vehicles, and we think that in a few years, everybody's going to be driving an electric vehicle, except they're like $90,000, and most of the people who are in Canada are actually Indian people who live off one Uber Eats delivery an hour. So, listen, folks, if you're not driving an EV in the winter and getting stuck in the snow and not being able to charge it, then you're doing something wrong. Why would you want one of those big gas guzzlers when you can have one of these sexy, sleek, homosexual vehicles that track your every movement and can be shut off by the government at any moment if we deem your behavior inappropriate? My name is Justin Trudeau, and I stand for anything that people think is gay.
And that's what happened while we were away.
That was good. I like that. I like the lisp all the way through, too. Nice touch. Aaron's montage brought to you by... We missed Aaron's montage, did we not?
We did.
We did. That was Gold, Jerry. And not coincidentally, it's brought to you by our friends over at Birch Gold. You've seen the news about what is coming. There's a massive paradigm shift underway. And Aaron just chronicled it for you in his montage. And no paradigm shifts happen without some form of pain. And Trump, to his credit, is saying, there's probably going to be some pain. All right? So make sure to remember that gold is your safe haven in times of paradigm shifts. And Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text Steve to 989-898. Text Steve to 989-898. Get your free info kit on gold and a copy of the Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword from Don Jr. himself. No obligation here, folks, just information. All right, Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans, countless 5-star reviews. Text my name, Steve, to the number 989-898 today. Text Steve to 989-898 today. Let's have a quick word as a team on what happened here with the third pilot over the weekend. And that's still, to me, inexplicable crash. Okay? Inexplicable. And I had a guy send me a note today. I'm a pilot. We're losing trust in you. That you think that you think you're. I'm not going to apologize at all for something seems wrong about the panoramic view of a military helicopter headed straight for a civilian airliner a minute before it touches down over the airspace of one of the most strategically important public airspaces in the United States of America, our nation's capital. I'm not going to apologize for it, asking questions or wanting a lot of understanding of how this could have possibly happened, okay? Because if it's not terrorism, fine. And if it's something that happens all of the time, and so I'm overestimating why doesn't it happen more times, fine, okay? Then you're left with one option. Something uniquely was wrong with this piloting crew of that helicopter that caused the deaths of 67 people, including themselves. Is there another option I'm missing? There's terrorism, there's systemic Russian roulette in the way they've been doing this, or this is an egregious form of error that deserves a thorough accounting. Is there a fourth option that explains this that I'm not aware of that you guys can come up with?
Don't think so.
No.
Okay.
So I'm probably on the third option.
Okay, I'll even then let's go. We'll only just do that. I only want to talk about the third option today, because this is I'm going to give Pete Hegseth a lot of grace. Dude's been on the job for 2.5 days, basically. All right, and this is a massive bureaucracy to get your arms around. Okay. But what happened here with her and the lack of release of her name, the scrubbing of her social media, you find out she's a member of a protected class, okay? This can't ever happen again. It cannot. And yeah, I know that sucks. It's a lot to put on you. But brother, we don't have anybody else. I'm reading stories now that all these people that Trump's letting go, God bless them, in all these agencies and departments and NGOs, Now they're telling us that these people lack any discernible skill, that they could make anything commiserate to their standard of living in the private sector. No. Shocking development. So that's my way of saying, Pete, yeah, brother, it's pretty much up to you and the team you put in place. This can never happen again, where there is time to scrub social media, everything else, before we are told the truth. It just simply can't happen again. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm seeing the same kind of attitude, not necessarily from pilots, ex-military, or just people saying that conservatives. And I put out aggressively before the name was released. This is a mistake, and people countered that. Listen, this isn't just Steve's son-in-law, military. My oldest daughter's long-term
father-in-law, lifetime retired,
Yes.
101st Airborne.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you.
My oldest daughter's boyfriend is currently a Marine stationed in Japan. But this wasn't just a helicopter of 3 people that went down in a solo accident. You guys were saying, let the dead grieve. 60 people died in the other plane crash. What about them?
Right.
You were making conservative arguments saying that it was wrong to make sure we know transparently who the pilots were. Folks, this is...
And they only applied this notice to one pilot, the one who meets a DEI requirement. The other 2 identities we knew within, 24, 36 hours? This took, 3 days before they told us?
Yeah.
And it just so happens to be one that checks a lot of boxes and a lot of narratives, who just so happen to have her social media effectively scrubbed in the interim. Hell to the no. We're never doing that again. Never. Okay. A lot of what I've seen the first week and a half in this administration, like I voted for that, I voted for that, I voted for that, I voted for that. I'm ecstatic. And we're going to get to the ecstatic part here in just a minute. But I want to make sure I make it very clear. I did not vote for that. And that better not happen again. Period. Go ahead.
There's a lot of you, and I've seen you do this in the past when it's cops doing bad things, that instantly, no. Cops can never be blamed for anything. This is what I mean by smashing the idols. All of them. There's a lot of you who have no-go zones when it comes to applying reason and logic to the things that are breaking us as a culture. I'm the same with Steve. Unacceptable. We don't know it. Now that we know who this girl is, even whatever particular class she's from, there's still tons of things we don't know. We don't have to race out to go too far in the other direction either, but we're going to put all our cards on the table.
Yeah, I mean, in this day and age, wasn't it just last week the CIA came out and said, yeah, it was probably a lab leak?
Exactly.
It was just like last week that happened. And I've seen conservatives, right-wingers on X over the weekend saying, hey, don't say anything. Don't say anything about this being a DEI hire. You don't know that. You don't know that. You know, conservatives coming out and saying this is a DEI hire is the same thing as Joy Reid stubbing her toe and screaming racism. I agree that if it was just in a vacuum, you see a woman pilot, automatically you say DEI hire. Yeah, you're not really any better than Joy Reid screaming racism after stubbing her toe. But in the context in which we just witnessed over the past 4 or 5 days that you just laid out, we're not going to release the name. And now we are, but it turns out her social media feed is scrubbed, and we're having all of these details. It does not lend itself to accountability. It doesn't lend itself to actual transparency. So no, I'm not going to fault you if you want to ask those questions, similar to what Donald Trump was saying. In fact, he went even further in saying questions about this, if this was a DEI hire, if this was something like that, if this was somebody who was not really qualified to be doing what she was doing, we need to be asking those questions. That's just common sense. In this day and age, yes, it is common sense. 20, 40 years ago, no, you would be probably kind of crazy and, let's just say, mean-spirited to ask those types of questions. In this day and age, you're just being wise as a serpent, from my view. Having said all of that, I still think it's option 3, probably. Now, I was more on option 3 that you laid out a little bit ago, that this was an error on error on error, a Swiss cheese of errors, if you will. But after the video came out on Friday, I'm less sure of that. But Occam's razor says it's probably option number 3, that this was just compounding errors that ended up in tragedy.
Well said, both of you. We'll let it go. Pete is off to a phenomenal start. It's a hella job. That's not a swamp that needs drained. That's a fumigation he's got to do at the DOD. Maybe a freaking exorcism he has to do there. Okay, but this can't ever happen again. That's all. Moving on. All right. I think you see worldviews, long established and cemented worldviews. I think you see them in the rest of your montage, Aaron. You know, I remember going up I remember being wooed by Trump, to work for him. Is he real? Kind of late to the party on a lot of these kinds of issues, right? Okay. Then competing against him in that primary, feeling the same way. Okay. And then there were times when he was president the first time, the highs were very high and the lows were very low, right? So what exactly is this guy's worldview? We ultimately came to the conclusion kind of art of the deal is kind of his worldview, at least pre-assassination. And by the way, with everything going on, y'all should have just killed him when you had the chance. I mean, should have came at him with something better than the math club shooter, because he is making you all pay. I mean, you don't come at the king and miss. I mean, he is, I mean, the amount of wadded panties throughout the globalist cabals right now, okay? I mean, this is, first of all, this is actually an issue that Trump has felt strongly about for decades. There's decades of video file footage of him talking about these kinds of trade issues. So this has been an issue with him from the beginning. And remember, the first time he ran for president in 2000 was to take over Ross Perot's Reform Party. These are a lot of, if you go back and watch a lot of Ross Perot's kinds of talks, he had a lot to say about these kinds of issues too. Okay, so we have an established aspect of Trump's worldview here. Maybe that even feeds into art of the deal as well. Okay, that we're the side with all the leverage, and yet we're the ones that keep taking it in the shorts, right? Okay, but this vector of his worldview is a well-established, predates his political evolution. Okay. I mean, these are things, go back and watch Oprah footage from interviews in the 80s. I mean, he has been on record about this stuff for decades consistently. So he clearly has a conviction. Now that conviction, I believe, is buoyed by the fact y'all tried to kill him and didn't get the job done. Right? So now he's like, well, I missed the assassin's bullet missed me by a cheekbone. I don't have to face the voters again. This is my last go around. You know what I'm saying? So now it's a long-standing conviction plus timing, where he's like, I'm just going for broke. And you know, we were talking before the show about how originally, and this is where Todd gets some credit, this is something you saw even the very first time that he ran, the idea of using tariffs, as you put it, Aaron, before the show, as a cudgel for leverage, okay? But as you also put it, Aaron, before the show, so Todd, you were on that from the beginning. I was late to that party, so props to you. And Aaron, you pointed out, looking back at things that J.D. Vance and others are saying, okay, and within Trump, that are high up in Trump world, this might not just be a cudgel. It might be a paradigm shift, right? And so you are watching and how often have we said this? I voted for that. I voted for that. I voted for that. This is what it might not always be specifically in the form we want, but paradigm shift is what we voted for. Otherwise, people would have voted a different way in the last election. They wanted a disruption of the status quo. And Trump now is actually doing it. He has become now what a lot of people on the right put their hopes in and a lot of people on the left had fears of. He has finally now become that. Okay? You contrast this with the Democratic Party. And I see a bunch of people saying they don't get it. It's not that they don't get it. It's not that they don't get it. They can't. They cannot get it. They can't get it. There's no amount of objective information. For every Jennifer Say, who's been on our show a couple times here in the last few months, former woman of the left, okay, now finds yourself hanging out with us, all right? For every Jennifer Say there is, and maybe the most high-profile version of Jennifer Say is J.K. Rowling. Maybe on planet Earth, she might be the most maybe the most successful author in human history. Okay, and for every J.K. Rowling or Jennifer Say or somebody like that, or there's several names of people we could name. Okay, for every person like that,
there's the Grammys.
There's the Grammys.
Yeah,
and everybody there and everybody watching.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're finding out is how many people believed in their doctrines as political positions. And then when they were confronted with the reality of the outcomes of these positions or not, they were like, well, that doesn't work. That's bad. The outcome is not what I want. Therefore, what I believe is wrong. So I should do the mental math on this and change my beliefs, right? Okay. That is a person who maybe had sincere political positions different than you. But they had not religionized them. They had not internalized them, imprinted upon them on their souls. What remains are all the people who have. And so it's not that they won't get it. It's that they can't. They can't get it. It would cause them to change their religion. This is religious doctrine, religious dogma. Fully vested. You're watching Romans 1 here. Given up. What does it mean when you're given over? It means you've hardened your heart. Pharaoh has hardened his heart. And so we kick the dust off our sandals and we move on. So does God. And who told us to do that, by the way? The Lord who gave his life for us after one of the most brutal tortures in all of human history told us to do that. So if you've got an example of somebody with more patience and love and grace and mercy than Jesus Christ, by golly, follow that example. But as far as I know in human history, that's the best example we have. And even he said, yeah, that's the point, man. We just kick the dust off our sandals and move on. That's why there's hell. He literally says that. That's why there's a hell. Guess we'll find out. We're done here. Choice is made. You're not moving. And I think we need to be reminded of that. And here's why. If indeed, Aaron, you're right, that this is more than just the cudgel Todd correctly forecasted years ago, but a true paradigm shift, there is going to be pain. The forces we are up against are not just going to say, that's adorable. They're finally figuring this whole thing called humanity and Western civilization out over there in America again. They're not going to do that. On a micro level, Todd, you and I are old enough to remember when Reagan introduced a massive paradigm shift with the Laffer curve and supply side economics, and that actually the best way to get people going in America working again was to get government as much as possible out of people's way. And that did not, I know you've been told a history that it was morning in America again, the day he took office and the hostages were released. That last part is true. But folks, the next 2 years were hard, and the Carter recession actually deepened and went worse. Massive paradigm shift. Reagan and his administration persevered through all that, saw the turnaround. Next thing you know, they won 49 states. But that guy, that DFL in Minnesota, for those of you that don't know what that is, that's the progressive, that's the left wing of the Minnesota Democratic Party. That's where Paul Wellstone came from. Those are the people that think that the Democratic Party is not left enough. That's the left wing of the left. That's the new party chairman. Basically, if Beto O'Rourke and Tim Walz had a kid, that's who he'd be. David Hogg? I mean, how many pieces of quote unquote misinformation has that guy been community noted for just in the last year alone? He's the vice chair. The dog returns to its own vomit. All the stuff we talked about with Republicans last week, you're now watching it play out with Democrats this week. This is who they are. And without a worldview transplant, it's not that they don't get it. They can't get it. It's their religion. They're not going to let it go. Which means there's a lot riding on this being successful from Trump's perspective, and therefore ours. If it is successful, you are looking at the possibility Democrats might take more than a decade before they win a presidential election again. Same thing that Reagan did to the Democratic Party in the 80s. If it's not successful, you're getting a preview of what the American people will turn to next, and we may never turn around and back from that ever again. There's a lot writing on this. Thoughts?
So, very simply, don't let Chuck Schumer in Aaron's montage, don't let him be right about you. Don't be the soft-headed American who's willing to just cave on anything in the name of comfort. That's what he's doing. He's taunting you. He said, Super Bowl Sunday, you might not get your guac and your beer. Hey, I like a good beer and some good guacamole, okay? But I'm not going to sell out my birthright as an American citizen. Are you?
Yeah, what happened to Miller Lite? But we don't have any. We don't produce any beer here in this country.
Right.
Either way, So I'm not really sure what the long-term plan is now with tariffs, because during the first Trump administration, I was totally fine with using them as a short-term cudgel, a de facto embargo to get better trade deals. Hey, Mercedes, hey, BMW, you want to keep selling your cars in this great big market where there's a great big market for your overpriced cars? Hey, how about you source some of the materials here? Hey, how about you build some of those cars here? Great. Okay, you can operate in our country again. These tariffs aren't like that. These seem to be more of a long-term type of deal, which I think has a broader scope of what Trump, I think, maybe is trying to accomplish in the long run, rather than just short-term deals. That was before this morning happened with Mexico. So at minimum, they're a cudgel to strong-arm inferior nations to doing what we want. Good. I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. At most, it's a long-term solution to unwind globalism. Also good.
More in a moment. Man, you ever have that alarm go off in the morning and you are just so comfy and sleeping so well, you're like, I really don't want to get up. That's, for the last couple of years, I've been telling you about how much I love my Miracle Made sheets. I should have disclosed that. There's always a trade-off to everything. Nothing's perfect. All right. So the trade-off for that thermoregulating technology, those silver-infused fabrics that they use inspired by NASA so that year-round you are sleeping at your ideal temperature every night. The trade-off to that. And you don't just get, superior functionality, but also comfort at the same time because they're very comfy. They're very comfy. The trade-off for that is you get a later start to your day because you don't want to get out of bed. Had that exact thing happen to me again last night with our friends over at Miracle Made. Fantastic sheets. Upgrade your sleep right now by going to trymiracle.com/Deace. That's trymiracle.com/Deace. Try Miracle Made sheets today, whether for yourself or a loved one. And today, if you take advantage of trymiracle.com/Deace, you'll save over 40% off. And if you use our promo code DACE at checkout, you'll get a free 3-piece towel set. Save an extra 20% off as well. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made today. Trymiracle.com/Deace. Use the code DACE to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save well over 40% off. Again, trymiracle.com/Deace. Trymiracle.com/Deace. Well, finally, we've had multiple things get in the way of scheduling this victory lap. So finally, the third time is indeed the charm with our friend and colleague, Steve Baker. Brother, it is good to see you. Free at last!
Yes.
Free at last! How are you, brother?
Free at last. Yeah, it's great. 2 weeks since my case was dismissed with prejudice. I got better than a pardon. You may recall that I rolled the dice in my towards the end of my legal process. I was given the choice of a trial, which my attorneys told me was going to be nothing more than a shaming exercise. And so rather than go through that, I went on ahead knowing that Trump had just won the election. In fact, my pretrial hearing was the day after the election on November 6th. And then my start date to my trial was scheduled November 12th. And so the pretrial hearing went so bad. It was such a brutal hearing. It was such a brutal smackdown from the judge on every single one of our motions, every single desire that we had to present a case. And make no mistake about it, had I been allowed to present a case of selective prosecution as compared to my case to the other 80 plus journalists that entered through open doors and broken windows from the outside of the Capitol that day, inside the Capitol on January 6th, I would have gone to trial. When he completely disallowed our motion to present that case and the discovery requests that we had made related to those other journalists, then we knew that it was nothing more than a shaming exercise. And so I knew the little quirk in the federal law that if I was not sentenced, and my sentencing date was set for March, so that hasn't even come up yet. It was March 6th is what my scheduled sentencing date was, is that I could plead guilty to all 4 charges, and until I'm sentenced under federal law, I am not convicted. And so as a result of that, when the blanket pardons came down, so for all of those who had been sentenced, they got the pardons, full and complete pardons. There was a dozen or so individuals who received commutations. And then for those of us that were caught in that legal nexus between either pleading guilty or being found guilty by a jury before sentencing, we knew that our cases would be dismissed with prejudice, meaning they cannot come back to us at any time afterwards. And so that's what happened to me. So, yeah, I'm celebrating because this now means that basically the 4 years of crap that I went through never happened. I mean, it actually happened, but technically it didn't happen.
Explain to our audience why your case being dismissed with prejudice over a is superior to getting a pardon.
Because a pardon means that you are not found not guilty. You're just you're forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
It's more absolution than it is an expulsion, is what you're saying.
That's correct. So if they were convicted, it'll always be on their record that they were convicted. Now, they'll get their civil liberties back. Even the felons will be able to carry a gun again. They will be able to vote if they live in a state that does not allow felons to vote. Mm-hmm. And in the case of the dismissals with prejudice, that means that none of this, it's just It's not on the record. I mean, technically, I was charged with it, but I was never convicted of it.
Now, walk us through the moments immediately afterwards you got the news of this. And, you know, over the last few years, we've talked to you a lot publicly and privately. And, I mean, you've just shown an inordinate amount of courage, Steve. And it's stressful for your kids, your family, and everything else. So, you know, I always think back to Steve Young in that Super Bowl where he goes to Jerry Rice and acts like he's pulling the monkey off his back because he's just been living in the shadow of Joe Montana for so long, and he finally did it himself, right? You know, that to me is one of the most, you know, vivid pictures I can always remember of someone who, you know, trying to communicate what it's like to have this huge burden this lifted. Now, you know, a multimillionaire's lament that I couldn't win the Super Bowl is nothing compared to the stakes that you and your family and so many others have been playing for the last few years. So, but just walk us through what that immediate aftermath was like for both you and your family.
It was actually pretty emotional. I was in D.C. at the time. I was there covering the inaugural event. I was there doing television, radio with Glenn and his whole crew that he had in D.C. all day that day. And then we were at a studio just a couple blocks from the Capitol doing Blaze News Tonight from there live. And then there was a party, you know, an inaugural event taking place in the same building that the studio is in. And then all of a sudden, one of the Blaze producers came down and got me and dragged me back downstairs to where the studio was and said, it just happened. He just signed the blanket pardons. And they put me on camera immediately for about 5 minutes. And it was tough. It was emotional. I had a very hard time getting the words out. I was really plodding through the emotions that I was feeling at the moment. There were a lot of tears that I was holding back. And then it took me about a week, to be honest with you, before I could really process everything completely and start getting the words out. I wrote a couple of stories about it on Blaze, about the process. And I don't want to in any way, shape, or form ever conflate my situation with those that were so much more severely persecuted than I was. Look, I went through an example of the weaponization of government that I should have never been put through. And I had my good days. I had my bad days. I had a very severe roller coaster ride because how long they took to do this. I mean, remember this stretch, they were after me for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. FBI first contacted me in July of 21. They first told me in November of 21 that I would be charged within the week. That was an actual email that my attorney received from Assistant U.S. Attorney Anita Eve out of Philadelphia. Said, your client will be charged within the week. And then we did a press counteroffensive against them. They backed off. We didn't hear from them for 20 months. I'm thinking that I'm free and clear. I'm thinking that they finally decided that I wasn't worth the trouble. And right at the time that I was in negotiations with our editor-in-chief of Blaze Media and Blaze News, Matt Peterson, to actually come on board as a contributor with the Blaze, I got a grand jury subpoena. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is all over now. Blaze is going to withdraw the offer. They're looking at me for a felony of some sort because grand juries are not seated for misdemeanor charges. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, here we go. But Blaze came through. They sent me a contract as soon as it became public that I was under threat with a grand jury investigation. And I'm thinking to myself, my Lord, who are these people that would do that would take a chance on me like that? And so that was a blessing. There were tears involved with that episode as well. And then, as we all know, several months later, on March 1st of this past year, 2024, I actually was forced to self-present to the FBI in Dallas. And I was put in leg chains and marched before a magistrate at the federal courthouse in Dallas, charged with the 4 basic misdemeanors that all the January 6th defendants got charged with, for most of them anyway. And then my legal process began, and we started the process of hoping to build a case that would be a landmark case, knowing that no one else had gone through what I was going through, had been allowed to present this case. There were other journalists from the right side of the political spectrum who had also been charged that day. None of them were allowed to present evidence of them even being journalists in their trials. It was a horrible situation where the government and the judges in collusion with each other decided what you could and could not do to defend yourself, what you could and could not present to defend yourself. You weren't allowed to. We'll decide how you can defend yourself. And that was the basis of all these trials. And that's why I was not initially, I was not a fan of the blanket pardon idea. I was in the team of blanket pardons for all the nonviolent, case by case for the violent people. But then as you examine these trials like I have, I've attended many of them. When you start looking at the cases, even the worst of the characters, the most violent of the offenders that day, the most unsavory individuals of them all, including people that had that were career criminals that had large and extensive criminal history in their background before January 6th. I was totally in favor of their blanket pardons because of the having their due process trampled, having their constitutional rights trampled, having the government prevent them from presenting the evidence that they had that might be exculpatory, that might reduce their sentencing, having the government produce evidence and perjury, the actual subordination of perjury in trials happening in these trials. And I'm like, no, this whole process.
No, it's clear they weren't after justice. So they were after political prisoners. And so if that's the case, then if that's the case, you don't let your enemy court-martial your own soldiers, even if they're in the wrong. No army does that. Okay.
Right.
And so if they're not criminals now, but political prisoners, so all the things that you talked about are now off the table and we're going to treat them as political prisoners, then no, you don't get to hold our soldiers. If that's how we're going to act, then no, we don't let an enemy force court-martial our own soldiers. We'll handle this on our end. Thank you. Give us back our damn people. That's the way and so I made the exact same evolution on this as you did, for the same reasons you just described. Let's talk in the few minutes we have left about the other side of the equation for you. Because, man, the list of us who pushed back on the COVID narrative was small. The list of you all who pushed back on this narrative, way smaller. Okay. And I know, because I kept interviewing the only few people over and over again that were doing it, and you were one of them. Right? And without the work you and a even smaller than the COVID dissident army group of people did from the beginning to say, I just still think we should go through the process of asking questions and getting answers just to make sure, right?
Yeah.
For this day doesn't come for all the rest of those prisoners without the work you and an even smaller group of people did from the very beginning, actual reporting on this saga. And I'll never forget the day I had Jake Lang on this show live from a federal prison, man. I thought I'd been through every hell you can imagine with fact checkers because of all the stuff I was doing on COVID, Steve. I never saw anything. I never saw the system ever come after me like that, like I did when I had a J6er on my show live from a federal prison. And that showed me, wow, this is an even more sacrosanct narrative to the regime than the scamdemic was. Okay. So what was it like to see the work that you and a very small group of other people did to begin to poke holes in this narrative come to fruition with justice in the end? What was that like?
I'm going to give you an example of something that I've not had the opportunity to talk a lot about yet. On January 6th of this year, I was there. I was at the Capitol. I was inside the Capitol 4 years later, January 6th, covering the actual certification of the Electoral College vote inside the House chamber. Yes, I was there. And I had not received, obviously, because it's January 6th, Trump had not been inaugurated yet. I had not received my pardon or my case dismissal yet, but I'm inside the Capitol. And as I'm walking through the Capitol with two other Blaze correspondents, I cannot tell you how many times I was stopped by both uniformed and plainclothes Capitol police officers who stopped me, pulled me aside, grabbed my arm, and leaned over into my ear and said, "Thank you for the work you have done.
Wow.
Thank you for doing it. Thank you for exposing the corruption of the white shirts upstairs." And a couple of them even exchanged their phone numbers with me and said, "Anything you need, anytime, give me a call." How about that?
That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
You're not going to hear that from mainstream media because everybody attacked police officers that day. But as I've revealed in my reporting for over 2 years, is that even those police officers were set up that day. And they know it. Almost to a man, almost to a woman, they will tell you, yes, we were set up that day.
I've got about a minute and a half here for a question that we probably need to answer in an entire hour, but let me ask it to close it out. What's the aftermath of this? What's the ultimate fallout of what was done here?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of meat left on this bone. We're not done. We have to now go through the process of, with the assistance now of a favorable administration, a favorable House, a favorable Senate, new committees, of actually revealing how January 6th not only happened, but the most important aftermath is for us to reveal what happened in that district courthouse, what happened in the Star Chamber meetings around conference tables at the Department of Justice and with the FBI as they targeted individuals and purposefully determined how they were going to strip them of their civil rights and other constitutional rights in the process of these persecutions. And that is the most important thing that will come out of the aftermath of this.
Well, I have known the new U.S. Attorney for the District of D.C., Ed Martin, for many years. And I can promise you, you have an ally in that regard. I can promise you.
We most definitely do.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Steve. God bless you, brother. Congratulations to you and your family. And thank you for all the work you've done on this story for years to help get us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet. Well done. Good and faithful servant. Todd and Aaron, what do you think?
Didn't even get a chance to gloat about all the FBI agents who are now losing their jobs too, who are part of this racket. Man, justice. And I like how his appetite is not about, oh, man, I got mine, I'm tapping out. No, he says, no, more, as it should be for you as a true American citizen. There's work to do because you're a citizen.
Todd, did you plan it this way? The first question coming up on Ask Deace Anything?
I didn't plan it. It was early on in the questions, and so nothing beat that. It may trigger Steve.
Yeah, indeed. That's a heck of a tease for the next...
Happy Monday!
That's the heck of a tease for the next segment, especially segueing out of what we just heard here. Justice is good. Justice is something. Justice is real when it's done righteously. And you can't do true justice without righteousness. And that's what we're witnessing here from the new Trump administration on several fronts, including the one that we just talked about. That's real. These are real lives. You just heard from a real life that was impacted unfairly, unrighteously, unjustly, and evilly by a wicked, wicked system. And now those plights have been expunged. That is a good thing. It is good and right to wield power righteously and decisively. And we just heard a story about what it sounds like when that's done. Good can happen. It can.
What you just heard from Steve Baker, I voted for that. Hour 2 is next. And we're back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can do that several ways. You can email the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And then please subscribe to our new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. Real quick, speaking of YouTube, my good buddy, Dr. Jeremiah Johnston from Prestonwood Baptist, who co-hosted the Nefarious Bible Study with me a couple of years ago. He just did a presentation on Glenn Beck's long-form interview podcast on the Shroud of Turin that absolutely blew my mind, and it is one of the most powerful gospel presentations I have ever seen. If I could wave a magic wand and make every human being on planet Earth have to spend an hour of their life at least once watching this, I would. It was absolutely incredible. So you can watch that entire thing on YouTube. I would highly recommend, right after you subscribe to our new YouTube channel at Deace Show, that you search for Jeremiah Johnston with a T, Shroud of Turin, and Glenn Beck, and watch that, because it's absolutely incredible. All right. Also, if you love the podcast, we love you too. Please declare your love. It is the season for declaring our love, after all. Declare your love for us. Leave us a 5-star review is how exactly you can do that, or one way anyway. Leave us a 5-star review, whichever platform you podcast from, and we appreciate all of you that did that for us. in the past. The other way you can do so is to subscribe or follow on iTunes, and that way every time we do a new episode, it shows up in your feed every single time too. And appreciate all of you that did that for us as well. And we appreciate our friends over at Raycon. They've been partners with us on this show for a few years now, and we've rarely had partners that have gotten the amount of positive feedback from our audience that we have had from Raycon. And it's easy to see why. I mean, their everyday earbuds are your perfect partner for the gym, work, phone calls. They offer premium audio that goes where you want it to go. Their latest model is better than ever with a 32-hour battery life, multi-point connectivity that allows you to pair with 2 devices at once. And speaking of that battery, with Raycon's quick charge function, just 10 minutes of charging can yield you 90 minutes of battery as well. These earbuds come with active noise cancellation, which is often difficult to find at an accessible price point. They are the best noise cancellation earbuds I've ever tried. I mean, if you just want to drown everything out and focus on your workout, your walk, you want to just get away, these earbuds will do that for you, all right? They've got numerous colors and everything else to fit your lifestyle, your preference, whatever you want. And if you don't fall in love with your Raycons, they offer a 30-day happiness guarantee return policy, no questions asked. Just go to buyraycon, Raycon, as in you'll never be unsatisfied, all right? Raycon, raycon.com/Steve. You'll get up to 20% off site-wide. That's right, up to 20% off site-wide at everything on Raycon's website. When you go to buyraycon.com/Steve, buyraycon.com/Steve for 20% off site-wide at buyraycon.com/Steve. And with that, it is time to play a little Ask Me Anything. We have questions from our audience this week over on Facebook. Todd, you have selected and curated said questions. I've not seen absolutely any of them, although now I am very afraid after the tease Aaron provided before the last hour, because Aaron has those questions. So I am now girding my loins to get this week's Ask Me Anything started, Aaron.
We begin with Philip Sharp, who asks, does it seem as though our winning is going nowhere? There is only salvation.
And I have the sads. Was there any further context to this question offered? None? Can you guys attempt to add some so I can treat this question seriously? Because I seriously don't know how to answer this question. I cannot understand how anyone is blackpilling at this moment. I mean, I don't understand it at all.
Oh no, but there's.
So is there another context?
But we there's plenty of names that are big on social media. You know who they are. They're very blackpilled at this moment about what's going on, and they're conservative Christians
looking for reasons to be blackpilled.
Yeah,
constantly.
I mean, we were all about stay black, Vanta black most of last year, man. I mean, we can black pill. I mean, the Doobie Brothers sang about black water. They should have sang about our ability to black pill on this show. I have no idea how anybody is black pilling right now. I mean, I really don't. I would love to know what those reasons are, if they're sincere. I think it's okay to take yes for an answer. I do. I think that we can turn anything into idols. A zealous desire to not turn anything into an idol can turn into an idol. Then you just don't see things as they really are. You think you've stumbled upon some formula or flow chart or secret knowledge that was unknown, that others just aren't as discerning as you don't see. That doesn't mean everything's perfect. I mean, we opened the show with, Pete, I'm giving Pete Hegseth some grace. He's only been on the job for less than a week, but what happened with that pilot and the lack of disclosure, and then they finally gave it to us with just enough time to scrub her social media, that crap can't happen again. We did not vote for that. Now, much of what we've seen the first 2 weeks is exactly what we voted for. And frankly, in many cases, even more than we thought we were going to get.
Way more than I thought I was going to get.
But that was not a case of, that's what I voted for. Now let's hold back the one pilot who might have even been a great pilot. We don't know, but it just so happens to be that the one pilot who qualifies for some kind of DEI designation is the one that we have to scrub our social media before we can let you know who she is, right? That can't happen like ever again. Barring that, I just don't see. I don't see why anybody would be blackpilled. I really don't. And the only without just. Well, let me rephrase that. I can't see how anybody would be blackpilling without wanting some narrative that they bought into validated, which is another form of idolatry. I want my own personal vindication. Okay? The one legitimate reason I think someone could be blackpilling or be tempted by it is something I think we addressed Friday, I think, in Feedback Friday. I think a guy named Rick sent a note, didn't he, Todd, about I think what's going on is great, but these are almost all executive orders that can, if you're new to the social compact is broken, and I don't blame you for being new to that. I suspected it for many, many years. I just did not want to accept that that was the case because I knew what it would mean. If the social compact is broken, then everything I'm doing now is a zero-sum game from this time forward. And those are some big stakes, okay? But if you're new to that realization, I don't blame you for being new to that realization. And so I can then understand when you're like, wow, I mean, this system really does suck. Everything that's good that's doing, he's doing on his own. Something happens to him. Well, now it's like you said to me before the show, Todd. Well, now you know why they tried to kill him. Because of all the conversations we're having right now on the right is why they tried to kill him, frankly. All right. So I can understand if you're new to the reality of where we truly are as a society, that the social compact is broken and this thing is on a knife's edge right now, and it is very, very, very possible, short of revival, the rest of our lives as Americans are going to be determined by the success of this particular moment and this particular administration. And now you realize, oh, wait, I'm living in one of those terminal moments I read about in history books. And so there's no sliding scale here. There's no bell curve. It's a pass-fail exercise, right? I mean, it's win or go home, right? And you're like, oh, wow, that we could fail and go home and get pinned in the steel cage match on my watch and in my time. Then I can understand if you're new to having your eyes open to a lot of this, as a lot of Americans have been in the last few years, myself included to some extent, and I do this full time for a living, okay? Then I can understand why, you got to take a break and be like, man, we cannot screw this up, and if we do, we're screwed, okay? I understand that, but beyond that, I don't know why anyone else is tempted to blackpill other than they just want some vindication for themselves, and they've put that ahead of and above what's the obvious evidence right in front of our eyes. I don't know how else to answer that.
Might I suggest that when your faith story is like 4,000 years old and you're, ripping your garments, there is only salvation after 2 weeks.
Bring out your dead, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
What? Ask yourself some questions, because what? I got more than I expected. I also did not expect utopia of any kind. I don't expect that after 4 years of Donald Trump or 4 years after anybody. When we were created good. This life is a gift. And there's all kinds of theological conservatives who keep thinking that just getting to live this life and breathe the air is poison, and they can't wait to die. As broke as America still is, a lot of work to do, the church might even be more broken.
You're making Eeyore look like he's on meth. Like some
turning Eeyore into a tweaker?
Yes, some significant stimulant. I mean, good grief. You have to be looking for reasons to be depressed at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes.
LV Tower says, I heard you say on your at your recent conference that masculinity traits were to protect, defend, and provide. My husband has been disabled and sick due to MS for the past 10 years. As a man of God in his situation, what would you say is his role since he cannot no longer defend, protect, and provide?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that for your husband. And I will tell you, one of the hardest things I witnessed in my entire life was seeing what Parkinson's and a few other maladies did to my father-in-law, a guy that, when I first met him, was just a year or two removed from jumping out of planes before breakfast for a living. And, just watching him bedridden and not, being able to just do the basic functions of a man, let alone be the man from a behavioral standpoint that he had been his entire life. It was just, for me as a man, it was hard to watch. So I can't even envision that. And therefore, by the grace of God, go I. We're all one bad day, one bad diagnosis away from being in your husband's situation. The death rate remains 100%. I would say to your husband, though, if he is still here, then there is still a mission for him. And I would say this to any of men listening in a nursing home right now, and you're wondering, are my kids even going to come see me this week? Will my grandkids come see me this week? Am I of any use at all? There is no wasted material. There's no wasted ammo in God's army. There's none. So there's a purpose for why you are here. Now, protect, defend, and provide are malleable terms in terms of their application, not their meaning. So, what could that possibly mean? I would search for those things, for you and your husband, I would search for those things. Maybe the provision he offers is he is still able to give sound counsel and wisdom and support and guidance. Okay? Provision can take on multiple forms. Protection can take on multiple forms. Can he still dictate a text to a kid or a grandkid saying, hey, I heard you're going through this right now. I went through something similar when I was your age. Thought the world was going to end. Here's how I got through it. You will too. You see what I'm saying? It can take on multiple forms of application. The meanings are not malleable, but the applications are. And sadly, it seems like he's in a stage of life now where those that he provided for and protected and defended in the traditional application are now, like yourself as his wife, being asked to return some of those favors and accommodations given his condition. But that doesn't mean that he still does not have something important and impactful to offer as he finishes his race at the same time.
Among the most important things a man can ever do at any stage of life is to suffer well.
Amen to that.
He can be as great an example of that as ever.
Amen.
Ash Mason asks, if the Shroud of Turin was actually proven to be real, it would not change my faith because it would be a violation of the second commandment to use it as proof that Jesus is God? ?
Like I was saying, Steve, going to challenge some theology today.
So let me get this straight. The Shroud, correct me, either of you, you've looked into this more than I have. The Shroud of Turin is purportedly a photographic
negative. Basically the first photographic negative in human history. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Not an image of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
Yes.
But it's a violation of the second commandment, which is to not fashion idols, correct?
This is not the first time I've heard that. This is very prevalent, and not just the Shroud of Turin, but there's a whole sect out there on social media that have basically gone full Islamic Charlie Hebdo. No images of the Lord. It's all icons. All such things are idols.
Yeah. How do I answer this? If all such, I want to make sure I put this exactly as I mean it. If the correct exegesis of the second commandment was an unconditional, no matter motivation, no matter inclination or purpose, was meant as a blanket refusal to provide physical depictions of God, then why did God manifest himself as a physical depiction? Can someone help me with this? I'm asking. Well, in that case, it was God doing it and not us. Okay. Well, how many cameras existed around April 5th of 33 AD? Do you guys know the answer to that? It's a low number. Can you guys guess how many cameras existed in mid-1st century Judea? It would be zero. How many people were sitting tombside by Christ, painting an image of him buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea? Do you guys know the answer to that question? Because it would be zero. Yeah. Because the only people that would be interested in going were all Jews. It was the Sabbath, and they would have violated the very law that Jesus came as Messiah to fulfill by remaining with him in that tomb in close proximity to the dead, rather than the honoring of the Sabbath. So, I really don't. Again, this is another question. I don't understand it. I don't, and I think that the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. If the Shroud of Turin, and by the way, it's called the Shroud of Turin because Turin, Italy is kind of where it's been since what, like the 16th century or something like that? Yeah. I think it is. Okay. But it's really a 1st century burial cloth of a crucified man. That's not a debate. The debate is whether that crucified man is Jesus Christ or not. But if I just don't see how anyone could possibly refer to this as some kind of graven image. I don't. Because we would have had no ability merely on our own, if it's real. If it's not real, then I agree with you. If it is real, well, we would have had no ability on our own to create in the 1st century such an image. The technology existed nowhere on planet Earth and would not for several centuries, in fact. So to me, the debate is over whether it's real, not over whether it's a violation of the second commandment. If it's real, then it's not. If it isn't, then it might be. But that, again, would be the wrong debate. Frankly, that debate would be, therefore, very pharisaical, in that you are tithing in every ounce of dill, cumin, and spice, yet you reject mercy and sacrifice. You are fixated on the letter of the law for the sake of the spirit of the law. Jesus said to do the former with the latter, to do the letter of the law with the spirit of the law, not without the two, not one without the other. To do the spirit of the law without the letter of the law will turn you in to the hag, to the harpy that was screeching and yelling her heresy at the National Cathedral 2 weeks ago. And to continue to do the letter of the law without the spirit of the law will turn you into a Pharisee. Don't do either one of those. Don't do either one. So the debate actually is its authenticity. If it's not authentic, then you could correctly maybe have a conversation then, because if it's not authentic, it would have to have been crafted by some kind of human forgery. And at that point, if we want to have a conversation, if it's a violation of the second commandment, then I would agree. But the initial debate should not be about whether it violates the second commandment. The initial debate should be whether or not it is an authentic image. And then the answer to that would determine whether or not we go to the other question. But the desire, so Steve, what does it look like when you put the spirit of the law and the letter of the law together? I should answer that. So let me do that, okay? It means you have things in their proper context and in their proper order. It means that your desire when you see the image of the shroud is not to immediately deny other people from being exposed to it. But instead, you immediately want to find out, is it real or not? Because if it's real, we want everybody exposed to it. And if you saw the presentation from my friend Dr. Jeremiah Johnston that I saw, you'd want every human being on planet Earth to be compelled to spend 1 hour of their life at least one time before they perish watching that. Now draw your own conclusions from what he said. But the question isn't so much why do we want people to be exposed to it? The question is whether or not it's real. right? The spirit of the law. What it is the guy who said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Now, if it's not real, then I would apply the letter of the law. But if you have the spirit of the law with the letter of the law, you have things in their proper context. And you won't do things like pursue a certain form of exactness over mercy triumphs over judgment. Like the gal that came out last year, that was the OnlyFans model, like their number one model on OnlyFans, I believe. Wasn't she something like that? And then said she had a Christian conversion. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so...
Yeah, Michael Knowles interviewed
her.
Right,
twice. Last year, and then he just interviewed her again over the weekend, I think I saw. Okay. And the amount of people who immediately wanted to jump on her, not in the same way that people were doing it on OnlyFans, but to condemn her. The other way. Well, this can't possibly be true. Because she got on a couple of shows right afterwards and maybe didn't have the most theologically precise answers and knowledge. So shocking. Someone who's been a believer for 15 minutes after leaving, a complete den of iniquity doesn't have her catechesis completely locked down. Let me tell you, our churches right now in America are full of all kinds of people that have been going for a lot longer than she's been. And their catechesis ain't nailed down either, because there's a whole lot of people in our pulpits right now whose catechesis ain't nailed down for that matter. Can I get a witness on that? Amen.
The last 23 minutes have testified to that, Steve.
Correct. All right. So the amount of people rooting, the instinct when you have the spirit of the law with the letter of the law, the instinct is to want it to be true, is to want it to be, to err on the side of wanting that level of redemption story as a witness and testimony to the world. And then if it's proven she's a fraud, to then say, you're out. That's how it works when you put the spirit with the letter of the law. When you do the letter without the spirit, that's when you become the nothing good comes from Nazareth guy. Well, I mean, there's just no way that, she's just too far gone. Well, such as once were you, dude. Who determines who's too far gone? Your God now? You determine that? You're reenacting arguments from the Gospels, and you're the baddie in that argument. They kept having that argument. That's the argument the baddies were having. You're on the wrong side. I think I've said enough. I'll move on.
All right, next we'll go to Sean Meyer. Thoughts on an AI created based solely on biblical knowledge and facts to truly test the spirit of things.
Now, this is something I think if we want to get into the finer points of the second commandment and some other things, I have mixed feelings about. Because one of the best apologetic books I've ever read is called, I think it's called Paul Meets Muhammad. And the book's about 15, 20 years old now. And it envisions a future where this kind of AI technology is an everyday thing. And so essentially all the writings and teachings applied to St. Paul and to Muhammad are entered into an AI that gives out a holographic projection of the two men, and they do a nationally televised debate at the Astrodome between the two as they debate the resurrection, Islam versus Christianity, etc. So I would have a lot of questions such as, who's coding the AI?
Yeah, right now, if you ask a lot of AIs, tell me about Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. Tell me about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
The answers to those two questions should make you very skeptical about wanting to just launch AI into being the arbiter of the gospel.
And my guess is this question is probably presented from that perspective. I would my default position is technology is morally neutral, and it's human beings who aren't. I would maintain that in this question, but because I'm a total depravity guy, I don't think that is I don't think that's a technology I trust human beings with.
Every time this comes up, all I think about is the Captain Marvel movie, which exceeded
a biblical Ultron, basically.
Exceeded all of my expectations.
We just watched this last night.
And at the end, come as you are, and it's all hip and it's all cool. And the whole time, Captain Marvel, who had perhaps the greatest superpowers in the entire universe was tamped down to make, you still have powers, but we're going to keep them controlled. So you never know that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're going to be told a nice, sweet nursery rhyme. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the whole, the point of that movie is ultimately to take AI and say, this is garbage. And it's right. We are, see, as many good things have happened in the last 2 weeks, looming right there is some serious bad juju that we're going to have to deal with.
Did you want to say something, Aaron? Because I have one more thing, but go ahead.
I just think you need to drill it into your minds over and over and over again. There is no such thing, for all intents and purposes, there is no such thing as neutral coding. And there never has been. Mm-hmm. Because coding is done by whom? Other computers? Neutral beings? No, human beings. Yeah. Always. Forever and always. So the notion that we can have a neutral anything when it comes to coding in the digital realm is just not true. The best that we can hope for is righteous and virtuous coders.
A thought came to me as you were talking, Todd, and I wonder if it's just my own imagination or inspired, but the word is already alive. The word is already alive. I don't think we need to try to create some form of artificial being to make it more alive for us. It's already alive.
A healthy church would just say, no, we got this.
Yeah. I mean,
but we're not a healthy church.
We have, it was already compiled for us. How about an AI wife? So I don't have to relate to her at all.
Well, I don't
have to be there for her at all. I don't have to cuddle with her at all. I don't have to comfort her at all.
It's not a coincidence. These things are happening simultaneously, Steve.
Right. Because ultimately, I mean, the Word of God is the most intimate relationship God can have with you, is to literally record his own thoughts, actions, opinions, principles, guidance in an eternal word that is alive as we speak. To then think that, well, we need to come in and kind of make it more accessible. The more I think about it, all the reasons we would think this, I think, are bad. More in a moment. Well, if indeed you are black pilling, prove it. I got just the way. Our friends at My Patriot Supply, right now, they're offering $50 off their 4-week emergency food kit. That's breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks. So get yourself ready right now while you can. No, in all seriousness, I think everybody should do it. I mean, I'm living a pretty good life in Iowa, but I thought after what I saw in Western Carolina last year, if that can happen to them, that can happen to us. So I got a hold of My Patriot Supply, right? I've got it in my garage, in my shed right now, just in case, that can never happen here. Happens where I am, which is why you should do it too, just in case it happens where you are. All right. $50 off their 4-week emergency food kit right now, plus free shipping, stays good for up to 25 years. All right. So that you have that long-term peace of mind that if it goes down where you are prepared with one of the most basic necessities, food. Preparewithdace.com is where you want to go for the big discount. That's preparewithdace.com. Again, that's preparewithdace.com. All right, back to some Ask Me Anything, Aaron.
All right, we will continue with Brian Corlett, who asks if AI is finishing what technology started, namely replacing first the physical and now mental labor originally given to man, the one to whom God gave dominion, then what is a believer's attitude towards AI, that to which we are surrendering our dominion? What is our attitude to be?
It's a great question, but I think it risks, because again, I get these questions in a static form in writing, so I can't counter and re-engage with you all to know what your premise is, your motivations are. So please don't take offense if this is not where you're coming from. But I think we should state that this risks making the opposite error. because we would say the same thing to some degree could have been said about certain kinds of, proto forms of robotics on assembly lines, right? Or kiosks at fast food joints, right? Or computers in general. Certain forms of software that make the ability to do your taxes, unless, you own your own business as I do, and it generates in, the high 6 figures to mid 7 figures of revenue, such as me. So I need a professional accountant, let alone what guys who are making serious bank in this business require. But, other than that, before I owned my own show and I just did this, as an employee of WHO Radio, we just QuickBooks this stuff, man. You see what I'm saying? That any form of innovation risks what your question proffers. So therefore, we need to ask if a specific innovation risks it more. And the answer could be yes. The answer could be no. I'm probably not as dogmatic on this question as I was on the other one. Because I just don't see how. I don't want to make my confronting obsession with idolatry to the point of paralysis to mean that I don't believe we should be concerned about idolatry. Idolatry is pretty important, right? It is one of the top commandments. Don't become an idolater.
Yes.
Right? Okay, that is the second commandment, basically. So I maybe you guys can come up with something I hadn't thought of, but just verbal processing in here in the real last segment, I struggle to come up with a way that I trust human beings, particularly in this iteration of the church. And here's the thing: if I thought the church was capable of conducting some kind of a catch-all for biblical answers on things that didn't turn into idolatry, we wouldn't need it. We already had the church. You see what I'm saying? I mean, why would you ask for an AI? Because you don't think the word of God is sufficient, or you don't think the church is sufficient. See, therefore, I don't. The first one is absolutely sinful and blasphemous. The second one could be, but could also be frankly correct. The first one is always blasphemous because the word of God is never not sufficient. The second one could be, or it could be correct. It's kind of debatable, right? I'd probably argue that if we were in a healthier edition of the church, you wouldn't want a substitute for, but we're in an era where churches franchise themselves. And we're in multi-locations. We're not planting churches anymore. We're franchises. And so that personal interaction with a pastor and that accountability and that relationship and that counsel either doesn't exist in too many of our churches today, or frankly, a lot of you just may not think that's a pastor who could really even relate to your true actual struggles, so you don't even bother. In the other case that you're asking, I don't think it's a blanket moral question just because an innovation takes the place of a human work. Otherwise, we'd be doing a lot of different things than we're doing today that we all take for granted. Not to mention the fact that it's human beings who are designing and creating all those innovations. So you could reverse it the other way and say the innovations, for the most part, are a sign of the fulfillment of our mandate for dominion. We are subduing technologies and sciences and theorems revealed in nature. And we are controlling them and manifesting them. So I think the first question of AI, in terms of an AI version of an oracle of Scripture, has such an inherent risk of falling into idolatry, I wouldn't risk it. This one, I think, is frankly on a case-by-case basis, like a lot of technologies are.
Yeah. What is your motivation for embracing pick any technology? If your motivation or purpose behind it is to escape the effects of the curse and sin, you're a fool. You're never going to be able to do that. And that's a cursed motivation. If your motivation in embracing pick a technology is that it will help you in being fruitful and multiplying, I think that's okay, so long as what you're doing is actually fruitful. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of the helpful rubric. Let me give you two examples with this issue alone. I don't know if I haven't told you this. I know I've told Todd this. But we use a transcriber on the show every day. I use it every day. We use it sparingly. It helps Todd with some of his duties on the show. But I've started using it every day. There's an AI tool that skims the transcript of the show and will spit out a title, a description, and keywords. The title and description are trash. It's terrible. It does not do a good job. The keywords that it comes back with does a really good job. Helps me be productive. Helps me be productive in less time. So I use that every day just for keywords. Title and description, trash. If I use those, I would just be being lazy. So I don't use those for the title and description. I know I have a close family member who grades papers as part of his full-time job. And the number of kids in college who use AI to write their papers is way too high. That's an example of embracing a technology for a bad purpose, to try to escape the responsibilities and the privileges that you've been given. So I think that's maybe a couple of different examples.
Aaron,
not trying to hold myself up as an example, a paragon of using AI just properly, and you should be, but that's just two examples.
You are absolutely over the target, Aaron, on this. And AI is connected to all the things we've done in the past, technologically speaking, in terms of that's the laboratory we've lived in. And I submit to you, if we took away a lot of our technology, would it make life harder? Yes. But what would happen to us as men in that moment? Would we robustly endure, or would we fold up? I think we know the answer to that question, and it's in a Simon and Garfunkel song. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. We would be an absolute wreck with our technology. That means we've turned it into a god.
All right, next we go to Susan Wagner Baldwin, who asks, I find praying a hard habit to form. Can you recommend a book on how to pray and some personal strategies, please?
I will never do that because I think it has to be sincere and not. You wouldn't want. Who was the woman that sent that?
Susan.
You wouldn't want someone. You wouldn't want your husband to seek out. How do I? What do I specifically say and do to relate to Susan, as if you were a formula? You would want your husband to make the effort to do it. And the willingness to make the effort to do it is evidence of intimacy in a relationship or a desire for it. And I think God wants the same thing from you. There isn't one example, in the scriptures, Jesus' followers say, teach us how to pray. And the answer is, our God who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Right? Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And then later, Henry VIII added, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. But that teaching is not as like a mantra, like, an incantation. But rather it's a paradigm that it begins with the exaltation of God, the recognition of who he is and what he does for us. And then it is a petition to him to take your cares and needs to him. Give us this day our daily bread. Okay. And then it's a humility of recognizing he has forgiven you and continues to forgive you and has saved you and is saving you when you deserved none of any of those things. And forgive us and so now you love because he first loved you. And so forgive us our trespasses, our trespassers as you forgave us. Okay. So I think that there's a love language in there that Jesus is laying out, but it's not like an incantation. It's not an open sesame prayer. It's not like that. Okay. And so, I would frankly just start with real casual conversations. Just like you would in any relationship. And then the intimacy grows over time. Anybody else want to add anything to that before we move on?
Yeah, I think we so long for the kind of prayer that is just the ultimate prayer. Worship, the raw, all in, but that's, we see through a glass darkly, we live through a glass darkly. So there's prayers of petition, asking for something, there's prayers of forgiveness, and then there's prayers of gratitude, prayers of thanks. And you have opportunities for all those throughout the day. Use the Lord's Prayer. And use rote prayer. Rote prayer is really important to teach us to get into that exultant level of prayer throughout your entire day, over and over again. Make sure you say the Lord's Prayer countless times. I have something to be thankful for, no matter how small it is. Say it. I have something to be sorry for, no matter what it is. Say it. I have a need or something like that. I need help in something. I can't see the end of this thing. Say it. Many times in the day. This Catholics say the Rosary, but the Lord's Prayer, He gave it to us for a reason. Say it over and over again until that mustard seed blooms.
I used to, on some level, subscribe to the whole, it's not a religion, it's a relationship thing. If you didn't consistently, with your spouse, with your children, with your close family members, make an effort to get to know them, consistency, over and over and over again, even when you don't feel like talking to them. That would not really be much of a relationship, would it be? Another word for religion, if you want to, it's my words, if you don't religiously pursue relationship, it's not really much of a relationship, is it? So it's not an art, it's not a science, it's a relationship. So think of it in those terms. There's no quick self-help books. Hey, how do I get to know my husband? How do I get to know? Talk to them. It doesn't require a book. It doesn't require a self-help book. I will say, though, there is one model of prayer that I really appreciate, and it's called the ACTS model of prayer. This is a good way to, as Todd was saying, the rote models of, the rote prayer, that's a good way to just get into the groove of it. But the ACTS model of prayer, ACTS, adoration, you adore God for who He is and what He has done. Not the thanksgiving, but who He is and what He has done. His greatness, His majesty, His awe. Confession. Confess your sins. If you're a human being, chances are in the past 5 minutes, the past 15 minutes, the past day, past 5 days, you have committed sins. Confession. T, that's where you get to thanksgiving. Thank God for what He has given you, the things He has done for you. And then S, the supplication at the end. Petition God for things in your life that you are concerned about, things that you need. ACTS, ACTS. Adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. It's the ACTS model of prayer. And I love that model of prayer because it puts the supplication last. Because too often, even when we get into the rote models of prayer, what do we tend to do? God is the cosmic jukebox. Even if we don't come to Him with that necessarily or that explicit demands, we have a tendency to please help this, please help that, please. That's okay. God's your Father. He wants to hear from you. But getting the attention off of me, putting the supplication last, that's what I like about the ACTS model of prayer. You want to take one more?
If you think we have time, go ahead.
Gina Patron Kelly says, my husband is figuring out how to play Black Hole Sun. Therefore, we've listened to it 9,000 times this weekend. You've said it's a magnum opus, and we agree. Talking about this after prayer. What do you think Chris Cornell was trying to convey in the lyrics? What is your interpretation? By the way, Nora Jones does a great cover on the piano.
I think it's a nihilistic grunge song from an era of music that was largely anywhere from cynical to nihilistic. Very well orchestrated as music, but in terms of its messaging was very cynical and nihilistic. That's what I think. And I think a lot of the titans of that era, from Stone Temple Pilots to Pearl Jam to Nirvana. I mean, Nirvana constructed a song about lithium, right? They wrote a song about a psychotropic drug, and it's like an homage. Okay, so that era of music in general. Whether it's STP and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana, You know, those were some of the biggest bands of that era. It was kind of a race to the black. All right. I mean, they were blackpilling long before it was cool. So, I mean, that's what it is. It's a lullaby to nihilism. That's what the song is. You want anything?
But it had a wonderful singing voice.
It did. It's a hella song. There's no doubt about that. It's a hell of a lullaby. Literally. All right. We're going to stick around and do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on Blaze TV. Until then, Romans 8:28.